Among the personality patterns Carl Gustav Jung mapped out, one stands apart for its scarcity and the sheer depth of its inner world, the intuitive introvert. Jung regarded this configuration as especially hard to grasp, not merely for friends or family, but even for the person who carries it. Picture a mind oriented almost completely away from outward feats, public metrics, or visible emotion, and instead tuned to a hidden current that wells up from the unconscious. That current is made of symbols, faint hunches, and pre-verbal images that most people never notice. In day-to-day life, the intuitive introvert's direction finder points inward. While many rely on straight-line reasoning, proof, and what they can touch or measure, this type listens for meaning that has not yet taken shape. It feels shifts in the psyche before those movements reach daylight. Because of that, what the world calls practical or urgent often appears small or off to the side. The person is not. Being proud or aloof, attention has simply fixed itself on another layer of reality where time runs differently and events are still unformed. Jung described this type as someone who perceives what is about to be but is not yet. Those words capture a state of mind leaning toward possibility, toward what is growing in the collective psyche long before it wears a concrete shape. That knack allows the intuitive introvert to sense social or spiritual tremors early, sometimes years ahead of general awareness. Yet a gift of this scale arrives hand in hand with strain. Everyday culture moves on another wavelength, asking for numbers, hard proof, and outcomes that can be logged. What the intuitive introvert meets, however, is invisible at first glance. That mismatch between inner knowing and outer demands creates a gap, often a lonely one. When such a person tries to explain a gut feeling about someone just met, to point out tension gathering in the air, or to predict a result still miles away, the usual answers are puzzled smiles, polite nods, or outright doubt. After enough rounds of that, silence begins to look safer. The inner landscape becomes a private country with high walls, and spoken language starts to feel too clumsy to carry what is seen inside. It is inside this hush that the true danger Jung warned about starts to grow. Visions that remain unspoken, unwritten, or unshaped can turn from medicine into poison. Instead of serving revelation, the inner theater becomes a cage. Symbols refused a path into consciousness act on their own, as if they belong to someone else, and the person shifts from observer to hostage. Here, the shadow side of strong intuition shows itself. When balance is lost, the same power that once opened doors begins to split the psyche, leading toward detachment or collapse. The first segment of our exploration walks through that terrain, how the mode works, where the risk lines are drawn, and, crucially, what turning points allow this sensitivity to become creative rather than destructive. The road an intuitive introvert travels is demanding, yet it can also brighten corners of the human story that stay dim for most people. Within Jung's framework, intuition is tagged an irrational function, meaning it gathers information without logical steps or sensory proof. For the introverted intuitive person, that channel points straight down into the deeper layers of the unconscious. While extroverted intuition scans the outside world for fresh options, introverted intuition looks the other way, into the old symbolic strata of mind. It retrieves images untouched by thought, untouched even by feeling or action. The holder of this type is in near constant contact with those raw forms. They are not seen with physical eyes, but with what could be called soul vision. An ordinary exchange at work, a simple family dinner, may glow with unspoken meanings, repeat old hidden patterns, or carry a strange tension that no one else detects. It is as though an inner antenna stays raised, catching signals too low for regular instruments, signals that have weight and charge even though they come without words. When the skill is grounded, the effect can be remarkable. The intuitive introvert picks up the real intention behind a decision, senses the drift of culture, or spots looming change before the first sign reaches newspapers. Yet the same openness can scatter attention like leaves in wind. In Jungian terms, the sensation function, the one that roots a person in body, taste, temperature, and present moment detail, often sits in the back seat for this type. Without that anchor, intuition can freewheel, A steady stream of inner pictures pours through, each one tugging at focus, until factual reality fades into the background and daily tasks feel distant or dull. The architecture inside is neither random nor fully controllable. Images surface because the psyche needs them to surface, not because the conscious self requests them. Handled well, those pictures become seeds for fresh ideas, symbols that heal wounds, or stories that clarify unseen forces. Handled poorly, or simply ignored, they pile up like static, clouding judgment and freezing action. Life then tilts toward a self-reinforcing dream where outside input struggles to break through. To avoid that trap, intuitive introverts must study the pattern of their own intuition, the way someone else might study a foreign language. They learn, over years more than weeks, to tell a fertile symbol from a stray fantasy. That training calls for patience, quiet, and structure. It also requires respect for a basic warning. No matter how captivating the inner screen appears, dangers hide there as well. One particular hazard stands out: vision that fails to find form and slowly slips into illusion. Intuitive introversion carries a property that is both fascinating and risky. It rarely lives in the present. Its attention leans toward what is coming, what hovers just beyond the horizon of awareness. The person seems to dwell on the border between now and not yet. Patterns in society, subtle energy in relationships, or unseen shifts in collective mood become noticeable long before anyone else labels them. In Jung's words, akin to a prophet, this person sees ahead. But a gap always exists between perception and confirmation. And it is in that gap that self-doubt, isolation, or grandiosity can sprout. Because the sensed future has not shown itself, outside voices might dismiss the insight, and inside voices may swing between certainty and confusion. The individual faces a choice: keep waiting quietly until signs appear, or push too hard to make the vision real before its time. Pushing often ends poorly, yet burying perception invites stagnation. Either extreme threatens equilibrium. Balance grows not from forcing but from translating, turning vague images into sketches, journal pages, melodies, or even small concrete steps that test the hunch in ordinary. Each act of translation pulls a bit of the inner spark into shared space, where it can be weighed, shaped, and refined. Yet the task is huge. Language, by nature, unfolds in sequence. Intuition, by nature, arrives all at once. Trying to pour that wide, simultaneous awareness into a line of words can feel like squeezing a sky into a bottle. Still, some effort must be made. Otherwise, the world inside becomes louder than the world outside, and perspective bends. With perspective gone, the intuitive introvert may attach deep meaning to random events, trust every flash of feeling as final truth, or retreat entirely into private myth. From the outside, loved ones see someone spaced out, prone to reverie, slow to respond. Beneath the surface, the person wrestles with images too urgent to ignore and too slippery to communicate. Over time, neglected symbols begin accreting force. They may invade dreams, stir sudden mood swings, or spark vivid day fantasies that interrupt work and conversation. Because these images come from layers older than personal memory, they carry emotion far bigger than the ordinary self can handle. Without a channel for expression, feeling floods the system. Concentration frays, simple choices become hard, and the pull of isolation grows. The gift risks turning into its mirror opposite, fertile imagination becoming rigid fixation, foreseeing turning into foreboding, insight melting into delusion. What then holds the key? A rhythm of engagement that grounds the body while welcoming the inner message. Some intuitive introverts run, garden, cook, any repetitive task that returns them to sense and breath. Others paint, compose music, or write fiction, where symbolic material can grow legs of story and find an arc. The method matters less than the regularity. Consistent practice trains the psyche to relay depth material without flooding the conscious mind. Over months and years, a personal dialect develops, symbols land, get decoded, and feed back into life choices. The individual learns to wait for more than one sign, cross-check intuitions, and invite trusted friends to test impressions against outside reality. It also helps to remember that intuition rides alongside other functions, not above them. Thinking brings structure, feeling names value, and sensation roots experience in the here and now. When those other avenues stay active, intuition joins a team instead of ruling alone. The inner world stays wide, yet bridges link it to daily responsibilities. Bills still get paid, plans still get made, relationships still receive attention. Under that balance, the introverted intuitive can serve as a guide for groups or communities, offering early warnings and insight without drifting beyond reach. Even with balance, outsiders may never fully grasp how this type navigates life. That misunderstanding is part of the path. Friends might ask for a straight answer and meet a pause instead, because the answer arrives not in words but in a montage of impressions that needs time to settle. Colleagues might press for a step-by-step explanation and receive a broad outline that leaves out half the middle. Patience and self-trust become vital. Over-explaining drains energy, yet shutting down widens the gulf. Finding a handful of people who respect the difference can make all the difference. The intuitive introvert's journey can be lonely, but it is not bleak. When the dance between inner vision and outer form goes well, this person brings fresh language, rich metaphor, and unexpected solutions into communal life. Movements in art, breakthroughs in science, and shifts in public thought often start on exactly such hidden channels. The sensitivity that once felt like burden reveals itself as an early warning signal for the future, a weather vane turning before the wind is felt. Still, that possibility unfolds only if the person keeps translating, keeps grounding, keeps checking dreams against daylight. From Jung's perspective, the central challenge is integration, holding space where the unconscious may speak while ensuring the conscious mind stays captain of the ship. The intuitive introvert who meets that challenge does not suppress the inner movie. Neither do they surrender to it. Instead, they learn its grammar, build a bridge, and invite the images to flow across. Each crossing enlarges both worlds. The inner becomes clearer, the outer becomes richer. This ongoing dialogue is demanding work, yet it carries a payoff of depth, meaning, and subtle understanding that few other paths can match. As we move forward, we will look closer at the snares awaiting anyone who ignores that dialogue. The next section will trace the moment when bright symbolic sight mutates into fixed illusion, and how slight shifts in daily habit or creative outlet can steer things back on course. For now, keep in mind that this unusual orientation, rooted in quiet, tuned to what is still forming, comes with both a price and a... The price is the ever-present risk of drifting away from tangible reality. The promise is a vision that, once grounded, can illuminate not only personal direction, but collective possibility. What the intuitive introvert observes is still invisible to everyone else, and that invisibility sets up a stubborn dilemma. What they notice cannot be verified, what they feel resists measurement, and what rises as a hunch usually finds no mirror in other people. A silent tug-of-war forms between an inner certainty that feels crystal clear and an outer world that cannot confirm it. Faced with that gap, the intuitive introvert may start doubting their own perceptions or swing the other way, clinging to them with such fierce assurance that the outside world gets written off as short-sighted. Either move positions the psyche on dangerous ground, because the tension between an unseen reality and the reality most people accept does not fade. It gnaws quietly at self-trust. Jung offered a striking clinical image to show how this mechanism unfolds. During analysis, a patient reported seeing, in her mind's eye, a black snake coiled in her abdomen. As therapy advanced, the snake rose up her body, finally sliding out through her mouth and turning into a serpent crowned with gold. Many listeners would dismiss the scene as pure fantasy, yet Jung read it as a vivid symbol of inner change, repressed. Material pictured as the dark snake climbs into awareness and, once met, is reborn as an emblem of renewal. That story is a textbook demonstration of introverted intuition at work. The function does not argue by logic. It speaks in pictures. It does not hunt for immediate causes, it reveals direction. Trouble begins when those pictures have nowhere to land. If a symbol is never shaped into art, dialogue, or action, the once helpful vision folds in on itself. The mind's ability to see the line between genuine insight and private illusion blurs, and what was silent wisdom can turn into lonely obsession. The frontier dividing epiphany from delusion is razor thin, and the intuitive introvert has to walk it every single day. Staying centered means spotting the mental habits that can tear reality loose from its moorings. Think of the moment when an unspoken symbol starts governing the whole personality, swelling into what Jung called archetypal inflation and warping the sense of what is real. By structure, the intuitive introvert tends to live alone, not out of social dislike, but because their attention points toward what has no shape yet, toward dreams, signs, and undercurrents. When that gaze never meets an outlet in the outer world, it sets the stage for an identity crisis, and, at the far edge, full-blown grandiosity. Jung labeled the swelling of the ego by raw unconscious power inflatio, the split second when personal identity merges with an archetype and forgets where its own limits lie. Inflation creeps in quiet. A person who reads deep symbolic patterns may come to feel singled out for a special task. At first, that hunch simply echoes their heightened sensitivity, but bit by bit, it can swell into a messianic fantasy. They may start thinking they carry absolute truth, that they are a seer ignored by a short-sighted crowd. Criticism looks like persecution, and any hesitation from others is filed under their inferiority. Isolation no longer feels accidental, it feels deserved. No one understands me because I am more evolved. That inner headline, once accepted, erases the ability to question oneself. Life drifts into a self-made myth where archetypal roles, the wise one, the martyr, the prophet, replace ordinary humanness. Over-identification with those roles fractures the psyche. Intuition, which once brought sparks of meaning, mutates into an escape route. Bills go unpaid, friendships become one-way channels for pronouncements, and every challenge is swatted aside as if it threatened the whole. Jung saw this pattern in clients who pulled back from emotional give and take and resisted every call to adjust to society. The gravest risk was not solitude itself, but what could follow, a full takeover of consciousness by unconscious images. When that takeover happens, the ego stops negotiating with life and turns into a passive screen upon which symbols play unchecked. Perception skews, judgment fogs, and day-to-day existence slides into a dreamlike logic that feels perfectly coherent yet never touches solid ground. Still, meeting symbols does not always end in collapse. A remedy exists, and it starts with expression, the craft of turning the unseen into shape, sound, movement, or story. When a private vision finds daylight, the inner prison changes into a workshop. The coming segment will track that shift in depth, but one point is clear already. Survival for the intuitive introvert hinges on giving the invisible a concrete outline. Jung held that a symbol left unspoken behaves like a foreign object lodged in the psyche, acting under its own authority because consciousness has not digested it. Drawing it, writing it, sculpting it, or giving it ritual form is not a luxury, it is psychological first aid. This translation of image into matter is what separates a creative seer from a fragmented mystic. Once the intuitive introvert discovers a channel, any channel, through which to send out their perceptions, isolation turns into communication, strangeness into language, and private maze into shared map. That act of making also performs double duty. It eases inner tension and opens a doorway through which the collective can meet ideas previously buried in the unconscious. History offers plenty of people who, whether they use the term or not, likely operated from this very function. Franz Kafka poured his sense of symbolic dislocation into tales that still mirror the absurd stretch of modern life. Vincent van Gogh, out of step with daily routines, let explosive strokes translate a soul that seemed to boil under the surface. Jung himself, aware that he carried the same type, set down his most challenging texts as efforts to crystallize private vision into frameworks others could grasp. None of these figures relied solely on talent. Their examples underline a more basic truth: symbolic expression is the bridge. A living tie must stand between your interior landscape and the everyday world around you. When that passageway is missing, symbols gather in tight knots, folding back on themselves until they start to twist how you see what is real. Give them an outlet, and those inner pictures flow outward as sentences, strokes of paint, notes of music, gentle movements. Each gesture rearranges the mind so intuition is no longer working alone in the dark, but cooperating with conscious thought. Creativity, then, is far more than a lucky spark. It is a deliberate act that knits the psyche back together. Yet even the most dazzling burst of expression will fall short if it never reaches the ground. By temperament, intuitive introverts can forget the pulse of the body, the beat of routine, and the steady fence of practical limits. When that happens, new dangers open up. The urge to make something can shift into pure compulsion, and the thrill of insight can turn into a clever way to run from life. Genuine wholeness asks that each symbol find a sensory foothold, that intuition be balanced by sensation, the function that catches right now reality through smell, taste, weight, warmth, and touch. Without that counterweight, intuition behaves like a spotlight that never shuts off, swirling faster and faster until it becomes a whirlpool. Think of how easily an intuitive mind leaves the calendar behind. It dives below linear time, combs the deep for patterns, then surfaces carrying visions that belong to no ordinary hour. That talent creates a special glow, but it is also the very thing that can unmoor the person from the present. Jung therefore stressed the need to cultivate the weakest function, sensation, so the organism stays linked to color, texture, rhythm, and breath. The heat of a mug between your palms, the dull ache after a long walk, the hiss of bread leaving the toaster, such plain impressions may feel trivial, even foreign to someone used to floating in symbol and foresight, yet it is that ordinary texture that offers immediate ballast. Walking, chopping vegetables, tending seedlings, shaping clay, sweeping a floor, or simply keeping to a reliable schedule. All these modest routines are medicine. They do not cancel depth, they support it. When the intuitive introvert learns to move repeatedly between a plunge into meaning and a deliberate return to tangible tasks, their visions sprout roots instead of spirals. They grow able to shuttle back and forth between unseen and seen, dream and daylight, making each journey with greater steadiness. That daily crossing marks true psychological maturity. The inner image stops being an object of passive wonder and becomes a working compass that steers choices, projects, and relationships. Ordinary rituals help even more. They need not be ornate. Striking a match at dawn, listing 3 impressions before sleep, arranging tools with care, taking one slow breath before speaking. Simple acts like these carve a thin but sturdy axis through inner clutter. They signal to the unconscious that there is shape, there is skin, there is gravity. Inside that quiet frame, potent symbols can descend without shattering the conscious layer. Adding sensation is not a curb on imagination. It feeds imagination fresh substance, allowing intuition to glow brighter and longer without burning a hole through the floor. Still, when intuitive introverts manage to speak their symbols and ground them in sensation, one last barrier stands in the way, carrying their own truth through a culture that trusts only what it can count, chart, or monetize. Modern life prizes speed, output, and reproducible proof. It dismisses private reflection and subtle knowing as eccentric at best, pointless at worst. For someone whose main instrument detects the invisible, that disdain sets up relentless friction between staying loyal to inner guidance and blending into the shared story. Every afternoon brings fresh forks in the road. Edit your words so they fit polite chatter, or keep quiet and look aloof. Ignore the felt meaning at a meeting, or risk being labeled strange by naming it. Follow an unshakable hunch about a project's direction, or play along with the official plan to avoid conflict. That tension penetrates tiny moments. In casual talk, you might stifle half the sentence because friends would roll their eyes. At work, you may hold back the pattern you spot because the board asks only for numbers. Silence can feel safer, yet each silence chips at integrity. Jung argued that real growth, individuation, requires keeping loyalty to the symbolic core while still navigating group life. For the intuitive introvert, living the inner message is not retreat, it is moving through town with an inner gyroscope that never switches off. You understand the vision inside you might never win wide applause, yet it demands to be lived, because, and here even the harshest critic cannot disagree, it is to point to paths that do not yet exist. Choosing depth over convenience, meaning over display, and unseen worth over visible metric becomes a silent form of resistance. Remaining tuned to the invisible in a climate of hustle and clipboards whispers to others that surface is not the whole story. That hint alone can disturb bland certainty or spark latent curiosity in anyone ready to pick up the signal. If you recognize yourself in this hidden tribe, if you wander through symbols, intuitions, and quiet premonitions that friends shrug off, you are not alone. Use the comments below to tell how you stay intact. What habits keep you steady? How do you juggle your private horizon with the clock and calendar everyone else swears by? Your note may land as a lifeline for someone walking the same border. And when you finish, slide over to the next video in the queue. It follows this thread a little farther and may hand you the missing piece for an even deeper dive. See you there.